Hi there, you are listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. My name is Matt Wakeling and thank you so much for joining me. Now today we speak to Johnny Balmer from Alchemy Audio in Chicago, the Windy City. Johnny and I talk about one of my favourite things, guitar pedals, and more besides. Alchemy Audio does a lot of mods and repairs and some original designs as well. So Johnny's a really great guy, really passionate about it, and we had a great conversation. Now, before we get to that, I want to give a shout out to Michael Fix, our friend who we interviewed in episode 3 of the podcast. Now, Michael's just been nominated this week for another Golden Guitar Award at the Tamworth Country Music Festival coming up in January 2017. Now, this is no biggie. Michael's already won 3 of these things. In fact, he shares the record for the most golden guitars for instrumental release. He shares that award with Keith Urban. A little bit controversially, because Keith has got 2 golden guitars for the same piece of music, apparently. Alright, so unofficially, I'm already giving it to Michael, but if he wins this, obviously he's the outright leader in that category, which is a fantastic achievement. Michael's a fantastic guitar player, and the track that was nominated is called Cosmopolitan Blues, which is from his latest album, Bending Air. Now, Michael not only plays beautiful fingerstyle on his Maton Michael Fix signature model, but he also plays some dobro and banjo and electric guitar on this track as well. With Michael's kind permission, I'm going to show you a little bit of that track now. Check it out. There you go. Just a little bit of Cosmopolitan Blues by Michael Fix. Hey, definitely check out his new album, Bending Air. It's fantastic. Great composition, but I love the tones as well. That acoustic just sounds brilliant. And I don't know what electric guitar he's got, but that is a tasty tone right there. Thanks, Michael. Love your work. Good luck in January. Hey, speaking of Tamworth, our friend Jayne Denham is putting together a show for the Tamworth Country Music Festival called Women That Rock, and it's got a couple of our friends, Michael Katselos from Stormfront Touring playing guitar. He is such a great guitar player. He was ripping at the Gary Moore Remembered gig a couple of months ago, and Griff on the bass. We love Griff, and Tox on the kit. Great band, killer band, and Jayne absolutely rocks. So that's a show definitely worth checking out if you're up at Tamworth in January as well. Alright, now at the end of the show, stick around because I'm going to play a track from 442 Music's latest Christmas album. Who is 442 Music, you ask? I'll tell you who they are. They're an independent record label in Sydney, and they do some really cool independent stuff like Telefonica, great indie pop band. Andy Ratson, great electronic music icon in Sydney and Australia and around the world. And each year they do a very quirky, very unconventional, very un-Westfield shopping centre Christmas album, which is awesome. So I'm going to play one of the more guitar-y tracks. So stick around for that. But now, onto our interview with Johnny Balmer. As I mentioned, he's the head of Alchemy Audio in Chicago. Really into pedals, really doing some awesome things there. And it was great to chat with him. So here we go. Here's my interview with Johnny Balmer. All right, Johnny Balmer, welcome to the Guitar Speak podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me, man.
Great to have you. Hey, I know you play guitar. I'm just wondering what came first, though. Was it electronics or guitar playing?
I play guitar, not as much as I would like to for pleasure. I used to play in bands when I was younger. Now it's more just when I'm testing stuff out at the shop or not working on gear. So, yeah, I mean, I wish I played more for just the pure joy of it rather than because I'm testing out some pedal or something that I'm working on.
Sure. You were doing some pretty big gigs back in the day, I think I've heard somewhere.
Well, I grew up in Minneapolis. I live in Chicago now, which is where Alchemy Audio is based. Minneapolis is about 6 hours north of Chicago. And probably most famously known for being the hometown of Prince.
Yes.
As well as, Replacements and some other groups. I was more into like hard rock and kind of, metal back in the 90s when I was really active and playing in bands. And, so Guns N' Roses and stuff like that was kind of at the peak of their popularity. And that was certainly an influence. And so I guess regionally we were pretty popular. We didn't tour extensively and never got to the point of where we got a record deal or anything like that. But we played pretty actively in and around Minneapolis. And I guess probably the biggest band that we opened up for was Wasp at the time, if you remember those guys.
Yeah, awesome. Was it who was the guy? Who was the guitar player in Wasp? Was it
Well, Blackie Lawless was
That's it.
Main guy, and he switched from bass to guitar, I believe.
Okay, cool.
Chris Holmes was the lead guitar player during their heyday when they were.
That's right, yeah.
So I know there's some funny video footage of him floating around currently.
Okay.
Did you ever see that movie, The Metal Years?
I've seen bits of it, yes.
Part of the Western Civilization.
And there's a
pretty famous scene of him sitting in a pool, intoxicated at his mom's house and making not much sense.
That can happen.
Yeah,
I guess that can happen. What were you playing then? What was your rig like?
Les Pauls, which I wish I didn't get rid of. I know where one is still. There's a friend of mine that bought a early 70s black one from me. I think it was a standard.
Wow.
He still plays to this day. So I'm glad it's in good hands and that he's making music with it. And it helps make the fact that I sold it a little easier to swallow. Marshalls, I know I had at some point I had probably I don't know the exact year because it goes back so far, but probably early 70s. I believe it was 100 watt that had been modified.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, probably more than what we needed for the venues we were playing,
Sure.
But that is not that's often the case with people. I know there was a Rat that was always kind of a mainstay in the rig, so I would play with an old Proco Rat. I know there was a time when I was, like a lot of people from that era were using rack gear, so I know I had one of those ADA tube preamps.
Oh, yep, remember those? The MP1, I think.
I still have one in the shop that I plan on kind of fixing up, and I wanted to kind of put together an old, like 80s hard rock hair metal rig, rack rig together. And,
yes.
Pretty sure there was probably an Alesis Quadraverb in there at some point.
Of course. Yep.
And like a Yamaha SPX 90. The bigger the rack, the better, I think.
Yeah. And you'd like a lot of guys will just use one rack for one effect only because they love the SPX chorus better than the Quadraverb, and I think it was just for one more unit. But yes, that's cool.
But for the most part, I was pretty traditional with just Les Pauls into Marshalls, not too many effects.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, the Les Pauls, you probably couldn't give them away until Guns N' Roses kind of hit, and then
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I always loved them. I mean, obviously you have to deal with the weight. So the older I get, the less interested I am in playing really, really excessively heavy guitars. But
sure.
that's where the tone comes from. I think often is when you've got a nice chunk of wood that has some weight to it.
Uh-huh. Awesome. And were you messing around with electronics at that stage as well?
Yeah, that's where it kind of began for me. Is I always had an interest in it, and I'm primarily self-taught. So I would the Bible for a lot of us that do this type of work is the Greg Anderton book, Electronic Projects for Musicians.
Oh,
And
yeah. The guitar. He was in Guitar Player for a long time, wasn't he?
yeah.
His
And
projects. Yeah.
so there were a lot of projects in there that you could build your own boost or build your own fuzz and
Cool.
kind of dabbled in some of that, and then just uh, knowing how to solder so that you could fix guitar cables when they would break,
Yeah.
or
Cool.
do some of that stuff. So that's kind of where it started, and then later on I did go to school for audio recording and got more into the studio and engineering side of it, and that's where it kind of went to the next level, where I was doing a lot of building wiring harnesses. I still remember there was a summer I spent in a recording studio in Minneapolis where they just got a brand new mixing board, and we had to build a new wiring harness for it. And so it was just endless hours of soldering connectors onto cables
Yeah.
and building it from scratch. So definitely had an interest in it, and then later on started getting more into like the guitar effects, which is kind of our specialty now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
things, building things.
Cool. Do you remember the first guitar pedal you built?
I think I started modding pedals, and it was probably a DS1, just because they're so, the Boss pedal, because they're so common and cheap, and if you mess it up, you're only out a few dollars that you paid for it.
Yes.
So,
That's awesome. My
yeah,
very first guitar pedal, Johnny, was a Boss DS1.
yeah,
Yeah, I bought
yeah,
it.
and I still, to this day, I still sell a ton of them, modified ones, and it's actually one of my more favorite ones to do, because I think it makes what I think is a kind of an unusable pedal quite usable and really improves on it.
Cool. I think I heard Brian Wampler say the other day he loves your DS1 mod.
Oh, cool!
Yeah.
I didn't know Brian was aware of it, but that's great.
Yeah, I heard I'll send you a link after we speak, but the
Yeah.
he's got a show, a podcast, and I think it's called Chasing Tone, and they were talking about
Yep.
their favorite cheap pedals. So it's Brian and
Uh-huh.
his co-host. And I'm not sure if it was Brian or his co-host, but one of the guys said he loves your mod.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to check that out. Well, and to give credit where credit is due, Brian had I think a couple books that were like self-published that were how to modify guitar effects, and they're out of print. I see people try and sell them for crazy money online now, but they're pretty readily available. He's definitely paved the way for people doing what I'm doing.
So with your early DS1 mods then, so what sort of things would you be doing? Like what sort of things did you get off through the Brian Wampler book?
I mean, the DS1 in particular, there's so many different mods available because it's such a common pedal. So everyone's kind of taken their crack at, improving upon what's there. But I just find the stock one to be pretty fizzy as you turn up the gain, and pretty
Yeah,
thin.
sure.
And so there's some pretty simple changes you can do, particularly to the diodes, to kind of soften it up, maybe make it a little more tube sounding.
Hmm.
The mod that I do in particular, I kind of refer to it as my JCM 800 in a box, and so it just makes this nice kind of tube sounding, higher gain, but doesn't get thin and fizzy as you turn it up. So if you're doing kind of hard rock, AC/DC type of stuff, it's perfect for that.
Cool. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And So when did your modding evolve into Alchemy Audio? When did you make it a professional concern?
Well, after we moved to Chicago in 2002, I kind of rediscover, I'd kind of taken a break from playing in bands, and I actually didn't even play that much guitar for a few years. I always had a few kicking around the house, but I kind of put that on the back burner. And then I kind of came back to it and rediscovered it. And it was kind of nice to come back, with a fresh perspective. But I also started getting into guitar effects and accumulating those. And then just, with my soldering skills that I had already had, I thought, maybe I can dive into the world of, modifying these and maybe building some from kits. And so like I said, I started off modding them. Monty Allums is a big online resource where he's got some different kits that you can buy and install yourself. And so I got really into that.
Yeah.
Then of course you've got all the different internet forums and DIY sites where you can, share knowledge and grab some ideas here and there. And so that's kind of how it started, just on my kitchen table, just doing it for my own, as a hobby. And then it just kind of blossomed into, I'd do a few, and then some friends would be interested in having me do it for them, and I'd do it. And then they'd, inevitably I'd get, a call from one of their friends, and it just really grew organically from the beginning. It was just, like I said, just me doing it on my kitchen table. I think when I decided that I wanted to kind of take it to the next level, I created a website, real simple website. I started a Facebook page, and I got some business cards because inevitably I'd be running into someone, at a gig or music store, and they'd, I'd let them know that, I modded pedals, repaired pedals, and they'd ask if I had a business card. So I figured, sure, I'll add some legitimacy to what I'm doing by getting some business cards printed up. So it really did start on a shoestring budget, and then just kind of grew organically from there.
That's great. That's cool. I love that word of mouth thing. That's like I said.
Oh, it's invaluable. I mean, and I think if you do good work and you have a reputation for that and providing good service, people find you and the word spreads, and that's been our main focus from the beginning.
Awesome. So what are some of the more common mods that people come to you for?
We do a few things. We build stuff from scratch. A lot of BYOC pedals because I am a dealer for them, and I think their kits are really great. And I like that they focus on kind of obscure and pedals that are out of production. And kind of faithful reproductions of those circuits. So we do a lot of those. We do a lot of mods to the more common pedals, so like the Boss, Ibanez, Electro Harmonics, just taking the things that a lot of people have in their rigs already, and trying to improve on them. So we're adding features in some cases. We're replacing some of the cheaper circuit components with better quality components so that they sound better, they're a little quieter. That's pretty much the main thing.
Yeah, right. Cool. Are there any so those pedals we'd all know and love in various shades, like a Tube Screamer or a Rat. Are there some design areas in those pedals that, or any pedal you might mention that without fail you have to address at some stage?
Well, I think with a lot of those common pedals, the shortcomings of them are kind of well known. So everyone's kind of trying to achieve the same goal. It's interesting when I will get my hands on maybe an old like Analog Man modded pedal or a Keeley modded one, and kind of look and see what was done and maybe compare it to our mods. And 80% of the time we're all kind of doing the same thing with maybe some minor differences here and there.
Yeah, wow.
But I think with the common pedals, we're all trying to achieve the same result. Mm-hmm. And it's usually, make them a little quieter if possible, upgrade some of the components, because, the difference between 10-cent capacitor and maybe a 50-cent one doesn't seem that big, but if you're a company like Boss where you're producing thousands of pedals,
Yeah, sure.
and it's right to the bottom line, you can understand why they're taking some shortcuts and just using some of the cheapest available parts.
Okay, yeah, right. So you're upgrading to some of the really basic stuff.
In a lot of cases, yeah, we're upgrading, and then of course, if there's something that I don't like about the sound of the pedal, we're trying to address that as well by changing some values of some of the components and just tweak the sound a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And what about common repairs? Like, for example, I've got a Line 6 M13, which I really love. I use analog dirt boxes, but I use the M13 for a lot of modulation and delays and things. But I'm petrified of breaking a switch because they've got a really bad rap because the switches, I think they're mounted straight onto the circuit.
It's kind of the Achilles heel of those Line 6 pedals is the foot switches are prone to failure. So I upgrade a lot of switches in those units, the different, the DL6 and I've done some to the M. And are there any other common things like that you see a lot, or that people are aware of? Yeah, I would say half of our business is probably repairs. So we get a lot of stuff sent to us from people, both vintage and modern, that are in need of some type of repair. Foot switches are a pretty common repair. Oftentimes people will send us something that just isn't working at all, and many times it's a victim of having the wrong type of power supply plugged into it, or maybe the wrong polarity. Someone tried to plug a power supply from an answering machine that they had sitting around the house. I've seen all kinds of crazy stuff, and the good news is oftentimes it's a simple repair because most modern circuits and pedals have a protection diode built into it. Okay, yeah. It's kind of like a fuse, so if it does its job properly, that will blow, and then that's all you do is
before the circuit will. Okay. Yeah. Nice.
Before it damages any other components, but it's not 100% effective, and there are instances where it takes out some other circuit components, and then you've got to replace those as well.
Sure. Yeah, that's a classic. Hey, the wrong power supply. Like yes. it was the right size plug, so I just shoved it in.
Yeah, well, and if you've got a decent power supply like a Voodoo Lab pedal power, has both 9 and 18 volts outputs, and it's very easy to just grab the 18 volt one, not knowing, and then plug it into one of your 9 volt pedals, and that can easily damage it.
Yeah, right. What's the craziest mod you've been asked to perform?
I've done some recasing of pedals, so maybe someone's got and it's usually some of the cheaper mass-produced stuff like a Dan Electro pedal or something where they want it put into a bigger enclosure, and then put some sturdier jacks and potentiometers and kind of make it more gig worthy. And those are fun. They can be very time consuming, and then as a result be very expensive. So suddenly this $30 pedal that you're trying to rehouse is now a $300 pedal.
Okay.
But they're challenging because you've got to replace a lot of components, a lot of the hardware, I should say, and then figure out how it's going to fit in this new enclosure, and then drill that out, and get everything to work properly. But I mean, those are fun challenges for me because it goes beyond just the standard mods that we do and repairs that we've done hundreds of that are pretty easy for us.
Sure. Yep. Cool. Can I ask you some general sort of pedal questions, Johnny? I'm interested in your take on some often debated topics.
Sure.
Can you explain? I mean, I've got the idea in my head, but our listeners might have different ideas. Can you explain the difference between a true bypass pedal and something with a buffered input?
Yeah, well, and this is a question I get a lot from people, and it's definitely a source of debate amongst people. And for anyone who doesn't know, basically, true bypass means when the pedal is not on, your signal is passing into it, through the switch, and out, and not going through the circuit at all.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, it's bypassing the circuit. And in theory, you should not lose any tone because it's just passing in and out, just as if you had a cable plugged directly from your guitar into your amp. If the pedal has a buffered bypass, like all the common Boss and Ibanez pedals,
Yep.
it means that it still is going through the circuit, even when the pedal's off, and there is a buffer circuit to boost the signal that's coming out of your guitar, which is a low level, into your amp. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both. I think for anyone who has a lot of pedals on a pedal board that happen to be true bypass, it's probably worthwhile to have some type of buffer in the circuit, whether that's just a standalone kind of external one. And there's several companies that make them. I think I have one made by JHS that's on a board of mine that I really like a lot.
Yep.
The most common way to insert a buffer into your chain would probably just get like a Boss tuner that has a pretty decent buffer in it, and everyone, they're very common and readily available and inexpensive, and if you put one of those in your chain, now you've got a buffer in your chain.
Sure. And a tuner.
So I guess yeah, exactly, which everyone needs. So I guess the debate could go on forever about what I don't think you can say definitively that one is necessarily better than another. But personally, I wouldn't rule out a pedal either way because it was true bypass or buffer. If it sounds good, who cares? It all goes back to the days of when effects first came out onto the scene, and Jimi Hendrix did not care whether something was true bypass or not, and back then they didn't have true bypass pedals, and he seemed to make things sound pretty decent.
He pulled a tone, it went okay.
So, but I get that question a lot. I think it's even on my fact page on my website about because someone will ask if it's true bypass, and it's fine to ask. I just think that there's a lot of times people will ask because they think it's something they should be asking rather than having an understanding of what it is and why you may or may not want that.
Sure. Cool.
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of people get very passionate about it, and a lot of people, like yourself, just seem to have quite more of a practical view, whether it's sounding good or not. So interesting.
Some of that tone loss or the way your tone is affected by a buffered bypass pedal, it can be part of someone's sound. I mean, I know I've read a review with Nels Klein of Wilco, and he's like, there's probably tons of tone loss and tone change going on in my rig, but that's part of my sound. He's just kind of, it's evolved, and it's he takes that along with with whatever the effects are doing that he's using in his rig. So
cool, nice. How about things like fuzz pedals? I've got a good mate of mine, Sean Bennett, shout out, built me his beautiful germanium fuzz face style pedal, which I absolutely love. Played it on a gig last night, had a great time. Now that needs to go up near the front of my chain, because there's some issue with the it doesn't seem to like buffers before it. Can you explain how that idea works?
Oh man, there's people that are much smarter than me that can probably better explain this. But yeah, the short answer is that buffers do weird things to fuzz pedals, and they don't like to see a buffered signal coming into them. So that's why in general, if you can make generalities, and pedal chain order is another thing that we could talk endlessly about. Fuzz Wah pedals like to be up toward the front of the chain, and if you don't have them up there, that would be the first thing I would experiment with. If someone's getting some weirdness between a couple pedals not playing together nicely, or something not sounding the way they think it should, start removing pedals from the chain, or just experiment with the order to come up with something that you like. But that's another thing where I'm not really sold on any like hard and fast rules, because I've worked with enough people that have some pretty unconventional pedal chain orders that work for them, and they make incredible sounds with it. And who am I to say, oh, this should actually be up toward the front of your chain and this should be over here? If they do it this way and it sounds great, that's all that really matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that can be a lot of fun too. I remember just even moving my compressor around. I used to, not that I use a compressor much anymore, but I used to always put it at the front of my chain because that's what you did. Mm-hmm. One day I put it after my overdrives, and I kind of like that too. It was just I don't know, not better, just different, just a different situation.
Yeah, noise gates are another one too that people can kind of experiment with the placement of it, and it'll really behave differently depending on where you have it in the chain, like toward the beginning or toward the end.
Cool. Nice. Hey, you mentioned 9-volt versus 18-volt. Now, this is something I've never done, because I've never had a pedal that can run off 18 volts. But what's going on there? Because I know that's a bit of a thing.
Yeah, well, there are pedals that you obviously would want to check before you begin experimenting.
Yeah.
But some of the full tone stuff comes to mind. I know the OCD is probably one of the best known ones, and you can supply anywhere from 9 to 18 volts safely to the pedal without damaging it, and there will be a pretty noticeable difference in sound. 18 volts is going to give you what's called like more headroom to the circuit, and it's just I think it's a nice feature if you're designing a circuit from the ground up and want to be able to offer that. And there's some people that prefer the 9, some people that prefer the 18, but most pedals I would say can withstand a certain amount of over voltage. There's people that will safely run some of the Boss pedals on 12 volts without damaging them, and they like the sound that has.
Okay.
But again, I can't recommend
doing don't try this at home, kids.
It's my repair business, but you always want to check first, because it is easy to damage stuff if you're supplying too much voltage to it.
Yeah, sure. When you say headroom, I mean, I know what that means for an amp, obviously, but for a pedal, what does that mean? Say like an OCD, a great drive pedal. What does more headroom mean for that?
Boy, that's a good question. I don't know.
It's
if
really
I can
subjective too. I know. I'm sorry. That's
Yeah,
but I do.
I'm not formally trained in electronics, so we should call Robert Keeley, and he can he can more intelligently explain what's going on under the hood than I could in that scenario.
Sure, but in terms of tone, headroom in an amp makes sense. It's not breaking up as early. Is that the same sort of thing for a pedal?
Yeah, and you'll hear a difference between the two. So it's not so subtle that I think the average person couldn't tell a difference. That's why for with pedals where it's safe to do so, I would say experiment and see what you like, because I've read topics where people prefer the 9, they prefer the 18. It can go either way depending on your rig and just your preference.
Yeah, cool. I was reading on your website, you've worked with some really interesting artists or bands, people like Wilco and people from the John Mayer band. What can you tell me about some of the artists you've worked with? Yeah,
I mean, we've been doing it long enough where we're starting to build up a list of clients and a reputation, and awesome. So we have done work for everyone from the hobbyist guitarist that's just playing for fun in their living room to people that tour the world. And being in Chicago, we've got a good pool of local talent to draw from. So I've done some stuff for the guys in Wilco, as well as Smashing Pumpkins. Doug Pettibone's been another client of mine who's actually one of my favorite guitar players. He does a lot of stuff. He used to play in Cinda Williams' band, and he's done some stuff. Most recently with, I think, War on Drugs, he was playing with for a while. But he's just a real great all-around amazing guitar player, and he does pedal steel as well as six-string guitar, and he can kind of do it all, and he's really incredible.
Awesome. Did the Smashing Pumpkins drop off a truckload of Big Muffs? Was that their
Jeff Schroeder, the guitar player in that band, has been a frequent client of ours, and as you can imagine, he's got a pretty large collection of gear, and so I've done some different mods and repairs for him, and he's done, in addition to the Smashing Pumpkin stuff, he's done some other side stuff that he's been involved in. So his rig is constantly changing depending on the project, and he's a really great guy. So it's been really. So it's always nice when you meet those people, and they turn out to be very, humble, generous, nice, rather than the alternative.
Sure.
But I think that's usually the case when you get to a certain level of success, where, you've been doing it a long time. I think they're generally more appreciative and just humble and nice when they're dealing with, someone like myself who's doing some work for them, or just other musicians they're working with, because I just don't think in general that you can get to that kind of level by just being a jerk to people and
absolutely
not appreciative. So that's been my experience, which has been really, really great.
Yeah, that's cool. I kind of think too, maybe not with everyone, but with a lot of guys, once you do get to a high level of success, maybe there's, you're not trying to prove anything. You're confident, you're secure of what you're doing and who you are.
Yes.
And that's good for everyone you're dealing with.
I totally agree with you. Some of the people that can be a little difficult, I think, are the ones that are still kind of climbing that ladder, and maybe they're not quite at that level of like a Wilco or Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah.
And so maybe they don't have that humility yet. That's the times when, on occasion it can be a little difficult. But, like I said, we treat all the clients with the same kind of courtesy and respect and level of service as if whether they're a famous rock star or just some guy that wants to unwind after work and play guitar. They're equally important to us. So
cool. Yeah, nice. Of course, that's no doubt why you're doing well and getting good word of mouth as well. That's very, very cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Slightly off topic, but maybe not. Is it true you brew your own beer?
It is. When time permits. Yeah, and that actually kind of ties into the DIY aesthetic.
I kind of thought that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very much into creating and doing stuff with my hands and figuring out how things work and doing it myself. And
cool.
So I think there's a lot of parallels you could make to working on guitar pedals and brewing beer, or I like to cook a lot. So, doing cooking, or, there's the process is similar that goes behind it, I think.
Yeah. Give me a beer versus pedal analogy in terms of building or modding.
Well, I think the one parallel I can draw is that with both of them, I really think we're in kind of the golden age of boutique pedals and, I guess what I'd consider like microbreweries or craft breweries.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Even just in Chicago, to use that as an example, there's a ton of pedal builders that are based here that are offering boutique pedals. There's a ton of breweries. It seems like every week I read about a new one opening up.
Yep.
And in a world today where everything is becoming condensed and businesses are merging and these big giant corporations are swallowing up other ones, it almost seems like in both the pedals and beer industries, it's going the opposite direction, where people are, deciding they want to try and build a better Mousetrap and opening up their own company and making a go of it. And I think that's really refreshing.
Yeah, absolutely. Literally in some cases.
Yes.
That was so bad. That was a bad drawing of that pun. But yes, talking about the Mousetrap, have you... so you said you build a lot of the BYOC stuff, but have you got any of your own takes on certain designs, or your own designs that you want to unleash?
The biggest challenge for us, because right now it's just my wife and I that work in the shop on a daily basis. So we're a small company compared to a lot of the others.
Sure.
And the biggest challenge for us is finding that time to carve out to do R&D and building stuff. And we've been experimenting a lot lately with breadboarding circuits and trying to come up with our own design. Mm-hmm. But we stay so busy with mods and repairs that's always the challenge, is, here's these things that make us money, that are our livelihood. And then, there's this time that we have to try and set aside to, build stuff, create a circuit from scratch. And all the time that goes into that is the time where you're not really getting paid. The payoff isn't immediate for that stuff.
Sure. Yes. Yeah.
It's in the works. And the other consideration is, I want to do stuff that is an interesting take on an effect, or it offers something different. Because I've said before, like, the last thing that someone needs from me is another fuzz pedal in the market. So unless it's something kind of unique and interesting, there's people that do that stuff so much better than I think I would be capable of doing. So, let them run with it, and I'll just, I feel like we've really carved out a niche for doing like mods and repairs. Yeah. And we're good at it, and there's not a lot of people that are doing it these days. So it really works for us currently. Yeah,
sure. So yeah, obviously you've got the immediate stuff, which sounds like you're pretty full on busy with. What
yes.
But what kind of designs are you messing around with on your breadboard? Are you talking about drives or?
Yeah. I love Fuzz Circuits, obviously. Yeah. I've been working on kind of an original wah design where, obviously I just drop it in like a crybaby shell.
Okay. Yeah.
But it would be a circuit that I would kind of build from the ground up with some extra features. Probably one of my most favorite effects is tremolo. So I've always had an interest in doing kind of a vintage inspired tremolo, because I love old Fender amp tremolo, and it'd be fun to do a take on that. So that might be something that I'll release. Those are the main things.
Cool. Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. So with tremolo, and again, this is a nerdy, maybe beginner question, but there's like I read about optical trem versus, is it a bias trem or?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's your take? What sort of circuit are you interested in?
Probably my favorite one that I've never owned one. I wish I did, but there's that old Diamond tremolo from the 50s that actually used a little cylinder that was filled with it was like a fluid, and I can't remember what it had in it. I know when people stored them, they put like Windex or something in them, which kind of achieves this purpose. But that fluid would rock back and forth, and then there was a little optical sensor that would sit where that canister is rocking back and forth, and that would create the tremolo effect.
That is crazy.
There's some cool demos online if you haven't seen those. But
yeah, I'll check that out. That sounds amazing.
Man, those are fun to mess around with. Yeah, everyone kind of has their own preference. That's another effect, kind of like fuzz, where people really have their preference over one over the other.
Yeah.
And for a seemingly simple effect, there's a lot of different variations out there that that people really gravitate toward.
Wow. I can imagine online people are arguing over the best type of Windex to put in there.
Yeah,
and trim. Oh, that's very, very cool.
Yes.
Awesome. So, man, you sound like you got your work cut out for you. But is there anything else coming up for Alchemy in the new year?
Yeah, well, I'm working on a project with another builder. He designed a circuit for the Lab series L5 amps. Are you familiar with those?
Yeah, the solid state kind of
I mean,
cult following those amps have.
They do, and I think, you know, among a lot of people, they have the most tube-like sound for a solid state amp. And so what this guy Kevin from AN Electronics did is took the preamp section of those amplifiers and built a pedal from that. And so he did the PCB design and kind of offers it as like DIY kits for someone that would be interested in building it. And I'm going to do a small run of those for people that would prefer to just buy kind of off the shelf completed build that's been fully assembled and tested and calibrated by us. But it's a 2-channel preamp with fully adjustable EQs, parametric EQs, and I mean, it's crazy. There's about 12 pots on the thing, so it does a lot of stuff in a pedal form, and it'll be a fun project. It's a pretty challenging build, and I think the end result. I've been doing some video demos with the prototype that I built, and getting ready to start taking pre-orders for those. So that'll something like that, where we're going to do a small run of those, and it's a pretty complex build and a pretty large project. I mean, something like that is, when we're a company the size that we are, that'll be something that can keep us busy for weeks to come.
Yeah, cool, nice. Very, very cool. Is there a rough date when that'll come out? If you're taking pre-orders now, what are you working towards?
Yeah, so we're going to take pre-orders so we can procure the parts and components needed for it, and then they'll start shipping in the order that they were paid for, and once all the parts are procured, it'll just be a matter of weeks to assemble them and start shipping them out.
Cool. Very, very cool.
So that'll be something that I'll definitely announce on the website and on social media once they're ready to start going.
Yeah, great. So I was going to say, what's the best way for people to keep up? So you've got your website, which is alchemyaudio.com.
Alchemy-audio. Don't forget the hyphen.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's the website, and then I'm pretty active on both Instagram and Facebook. So I would say if you want to just kind of keep up on the day-to-day stuff that we're doing and what we're working on, I try and stay pretty current with those and just posting photos of what's currently on the bench and what we're working on.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I see a lot of your stuff on Instagram. It's great. You had like a very vintage. You had a big box rat on the other day and a very old Phase 90 with barely any orange paint left. That was very cool.
Oh, that was fun. Yeah, both those were sent to me by the same guy, and you could tell they were well loved and well gigged. Yeah,
man.
Awesome. And the rat was just in for kind of an upgrade because those ones did not have the LED on them.
Oh, okay, yep.
So I installed an LED on there and put a more modern 9-volt DC power jack on it, so it's compatible. Kind of the Boss style connectors. Yeah. And then the Phase 90 was not working, and it was also the victim of over voltage, so it had that diode circuit that I mentioned earlier that had failed. So we got that repaired and calibrated and working properly, and those things are ready for another 30 years of gigging and service.
Very cool. That's great. Johnny, it sounds like it's still fun for you, all this stuff. It sounds like you're having a good time plugging in these old pedals once you fix them as well. And
it's great. And that's what I love about what we're doing is it's always different. We come in every day and you've got different things on the shelves that you either have to build or repair. And so it's not just cranking out like, we've got to get these 30 of the same pedal built and out the door.
Yeah, sure.
So I
Nice.
love that variation where it's just, you never know what's going to show up in the mail and what you're going to have to work on. And as far as the repairs are concerned, it's just always fun to troubleshoot and diagnose something and figure out why it's not working and how you can get it working again.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Very cool. Well, Johnny, thank you so much for talking with us this morning. This afternoon for you, or whenever anyone listens.
Yes.
Great to have you on. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
and,
likewise. I really enjoyed it. I loved the podcast, and keep up the great work.
Cheers. Thank you so much. Yeah. And you too. So, we'd encourage everyone to check out Johnny's web and his Instagram and his Facebook and look out for this new run of pedals. And if you're anywhere vaguely near Chicago, Johnny would be your guy for modding and repairs as well.
And we ship stuff all over the world. I mean, pedals are cheap and easy enough to send through the mail. So
yeah, cool.
We actually have a fair amount of Australian customers, which is always kind of surprising to me. That
awesome.
Even across the pond, they hear about us. So, yeah.
Well, there you go. Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I'll keep that in mind. If I ever buy back my Boss DS1 that I bought in '86 and sold in '90 or something, I'd love to get a listen to your mod.
We'll talk after the show. I'll send you a demo.
Okay. All right, Johnny, thank you so much. And take care. Love to talk to you again sometime.
All right, thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Johnny.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, there you go. My interview with Johnny Balmer from Alchemy Audio. And he's doing some really great stuff there in Chicago. So definitely check out his Facebook, Instagram, and his website and see what's happening there. All right, thank you for joining us on the Guitar Speak podcast. Now, there is lots of more Guitar Speak podcast goodness back in our archives. We've got another 28 odd episodes, I think. You can check out all for free at guitarspeakpodcast.libsyn.com, or you can subscribe to us on iTunes and have our episode delivered every week. Likewise, you can subscribe to us via Stitcher. We are on the Facebooks as well and on the Instagrams, so you can follow us there and keep up to date with all that's going on. I keep saying this every week, but I've got a bunch of great interviews I have recorded or am about to record, so really stay tuned. Got some great guitar players, builders, lots of different people coming up, so I'm really excited about what's coming up over the December-January period. All right, as promised, I'm going to play a track from the 442 Christmas album. Now, the album's called Bless All the Dear Children, and the track I'm going to play is called Cricket's Season, and it's by a side project I actually do called St. Jambience. So, spoiler alert, self-promotion alert. All right, there, I've said it. But, it's kind of an ambient track involving some of the wildlife you might hear around Sydney, certainly around my little home studio this time of year. All right, thanks again for tuning in to the Guitar Speak podcast, and hope to see you next time. Okay, bye now.